Welcome back to the Star Wars Newsnet Timeline Show. Brian, episode
What's going on?
13.
13.
And guess
We're in
what?
the teens.
You know what the teens means?
Yes.
The teens means. You know what it means? Everyone listening, you know what this means?
Yes,
It
I
means
know.
we have exited the year 382.
We did it.
BBY. We have
Woo!
survived. Everyone, thank you for going along for the ride.
This is a
We
hell
have
of a year for the
survived.
galaxy.
What a year, honestly, for the galaxy. 379 BBY, which is where we're at right now,
That's right.
is a much calmer time for the galaxy, I guess, because, we didn't have, 20,000 stories written during this time. So I guess it was a little bit of a more chill time. And so we're back in the Tales of Light and Life, which is ironic because it was the thing that started everything off. It's the earliest canon story that we have so far, which was The Queen's Bloom, which is our very first show.
Yes.
And now here we are in episode 13, back with Tales of Light and Life, talking about Shield of the Jedi, author George Mann, who was absolutely cooking with his Eye of Darkness book that came out very recent. Remind me, have you read Eye of Darkness?
I'm almost done with Eye of Darkness now.
Okay, yes.
I'm almost done with it. I'm loving it.
Oh, yeah, it's so good. We'll have to talk about that here pretty soon, like off air, and then gear up for a great Eye of Darkness show that I'm sure will be coming out sometime in the future. The High Republic Phase 2 is where you can find Tales of Light and Life, Shield of the Jedi. Again, like I said, the year 379 BBY. We are just chugging along right here. This book came out October 26, 2022. And Brian, I got to say, when I first read this book, when it came out October 26, 2022, I had never read a Rupert and Salandra Show story. Like, I hadn't read a story from either one of them. This was my first time introduced to these characters because I hadn't read the middle grade novels at all.
Gotcha.
And so I was going in completely fresh. And I was a little bit, curious when I started. I'm like, oh, who's this Rupert person? Like, I don't know this. It was like the one or two stories in the book where I didn't really have a strong foundation with the character. So I was a little bit not turned off. This is more just kind of a little curious. This was one of my favorite stories. Like, it was not my favorite. The number one will come later, but this is up there in Tales of Light and Life because I was so excited to read more about these characters. And I was like, when we started doing the timeline show, when I could go back and read these novels, I'm like, oh, Rupert, oh, Salandra Show. Like, I know, how she becomes a Jedi and everything, but I don't know, the backstory. So it was really cool almost to get the thing that comes first and then go back and read the prequels. But had you read the middle grades first? Like, you were familiar with these characters?
So with Phase 2, what I did was I took a complete step back and let Phase 2 completely come out.
Okay.
Before I started reading any of it. So I had Tales of Light and Life in my hand. I read Queen's Bloom. I read them all chronologically, except for Tales of Enlightenment, which I just got in the mail today. We will be talking about in a later but I really enjoyed. To me, it felt very natural with where this story went after reading everything that came before with Rupert and Salandra. Salandra was already one of my favorite Jedi in Phase 2. I love her. She's very unique in her mindset as a Jedi. You know what I mean? And so she took her duties almost very literal.
Yes.
And so I really liked her a lot. And so getting to this point with Rupert, to me was very natural. We've seen everything that she's been through so far, going through this show and going through all of Phase 2. And so I dug this story so much. So good. And it was that final lesson Rupert needed to learn from Salandra, and I think it was a great lesson for her. I think it was really fun. Yeah.
So this is almost a little bittersweet because we're exiting this part of the timeline and we don't know when we're ever going to get stories for these characters again. Now they are tying some things into Phase 3 with name drops, different characters show up, but characters like Rupert and Salandra, like they're not going to be around when we get to Phase 1 here and as Phase 3 materials coming out. So we're saying goodbye to a lot of really, some of our favorite characters now and moving into an exciting new part of the timeline, but still it does come with some changes. Now, we're very familiar at this point, if you've been following along, that Rupert has a literal shield that she carries around. She's like Boromir, with his shield
Yeah.
lugging around the Fellowship of the Ring. And she believes the Jedi, are to be a shield. And like you said before, she takes that role quite literally by having an actual shield that she carries. And she whips it around like Captain America sometimes.
Basically,
and
yeah.
it's pretty awesome. And there's this like rite of passage, I guess, that goes into, the passing of the shield, basically. And so Rupert is ready for her trials. Salandra has decided that she is ready for the trials. They're on
Yes.
Batu. And the task is quite simple: to become a Jedi. Salandra says, go find my shield.
Yeah.
Just go find it. Like, there you go. And I read that knowing nothing about these characters. And I'm like, I like this pair already. It's just, your trials are go find the shield. Do this simple task. Seems incredibly simple, yet
It does.
as we know with the Jedi, this is going to be some intricate puzzle she's going to have to solve and come up with this existential like lesson for life throughout all of this. And the journey to ultimately find the shield, yes, she doesn't fail, it's like she really has to contemplate what it is to be a shield to the Jedi. And going back and reading the middle grade novels, we see her come to an understanding with that, but it was really cool here where it kind of fully made sense. It was a nice kind of completion to her Padawan arc. So when you first were like reading this, like, go ahead and find my shield. What were your thoughts? Like,
I thought it was simple too, but at the same time, I was thinking what Rupert was thinking. This is too easy. Like, this is the challenge. This is what it's gonna be. Okay, whatever. That's kind of the same thought I had. But I had the same thought process that Rupert did, where she was like, well, it wouldn't be that simple. This is Salandra that we're talking about. Like, and we also have to mention the droid in the story.
Yes.
And I can't think of his, was it P7?
Yes, it's like the P7,
right? He's
the droid that we end up meeting from,
the Battle of
earlier,
Jeddah.
the Battle of Jeddah.
Yes, the one that speaks in like Church of the Force, like epitomes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and so she, Salandra, I guess, took the droid under her wing after the Battle of Jeddah. Still has the droid years later, and so, she sends the droid with Rupert, and. As Rupert's going through this, the first couple stops that she makes, right? It was like, well, maybe it's here. And then she really starts thinking, right? And then it kind of clicks with her. I was right there with her. I'm like, this is too easy. You're making this way easier than it really is. This is going to be ridiculous. It's your Jedi trials, like,
yes.
And so I was thinking the same thing Rupert was, really, like, this is just too easy. Like, but at the same time, it's also very, it's very personal for their relationship also, what kind of Jedi that she is and what kind of Jedi she wants Rupert to be. And so I thought it was kind of a nice little, personal, very personal level Jedi trial.
And so something we've talked a little bit about this before, but I didn't know this going in. And I love this about the High Republic. It talks about how the Jedi perceive the Force, and it's very different for every Jedi and very personal. And I loved how for Rupert, she sees it through like color and shades of color and different variances. And so I wrote this like quote down from the story that I thought was very interesting. She sees it as this vast web that stretches across the galaxy, with each living thing a vibrant node of light and life, brilliant and glowing. And the things that the people that she's more familiar with, like those colors are more clear, they're like a little more radiant, they glow a little bit brighter, and she can feel them and see them a little bit clearer. And I thought that was like a really cool way to perceive the Force. We've seen like oceans and rivers and forests, fire, all these different things, music, but to see it like just through like color, I thought that was pretty interesting. What do you think of how Rupert perceives the Force? Like, where does that rank on your Force perception?
On the perceptions, it's not my favorite one, but it's up there. I like it. My favorite one, and we'll get into phase 1, later on, because that's something with the High Republic they've done, is really talked about, the Force on a personal level with all these Jedi and how they perceive it and everything. Every Jedi is different. My favorite one is Avar Kriss, which we'll talk about in phase 1, how she, like you said, music, and so I love that. I love that so much. So, but I love the fact that you know, she sees all these vibrant, bright colors, and it's very representative of everybody's life force, and you know, and who they are, and yeah, I think it's perfectly natural, especially to her, you know, with the kind of
Right.
personality that she has and that she's kind of shown throughout all of phase 2 and everything. So yeah, no, I love it.
So lead us into the next phase of the story because we know she's helping this village and these villagers
Yes,
retrieve droids. She has to protect them from this.
yes,
Remind me if I'm pronouncing this, like the Salmica, like is that
Salmaka,
the
yep,
Salmica
Salmaka,
like
yes,
monster that's
yes,
threatening their crops and their village. So kind
yes.
of dive us
So
deep into that next phase of the story.
so while Rupert is looking for the shield, she's, you know, looking at all these places that she thinks are Solandra's favorite spots. There's a tree that she likes to meditate in. She climbs the tree. She, you know, jumps out of the tree. It's not up there. And she spots this village in the distance, and she starts to realize that Solandra has
Mhm.
always, you know, tried to teach her protect people, and she's like, that's what it's going to be. We have to go help
Right.
somebody, right? So she ends up at the village, and she comes across this guy that says, you know, my droid was stolen by a Salamica. And she's like, those aren't real. That's a myth. That's a mythological
Right.
creature. That's not real. And there's no way. And he's like, no, I saw it with my own eyes. It killed such and so down the street, and I know. And so, what it basically is think of a dragon from like the Hobbit, right? And so like it collects all this shiny stuff, right? And wants, you know, like gold and whatnot. And this thing has been going around and stealing scrap metal and different trinkets from people's houses,
Mhm.
and different equipment and droids and vehicles and whatnot, and bringing it back to its lair and basically sleeping on this big pile of just crap,
Mhm.
this just junk, right? Um, and so she decides, you know, to talk to this guy a little bit more about it. And she's like, did another Jedi come through here? And the guy says, yeah, there was another Jedi. And she's like, did she leave a shield? And she's like, and the guy's like, yeah, she left it in that tree, but it's gone. Like, it, you know, it's not there
and
anymore.
and you just feel the audible like sigh like when
Yes.
she like it's just you can just feel it. She goes, oh, of course, like this.
Yeah.
I would It would be a mythical creature now I realize is real that I have to go retrieve the shield from, make
Right.
sure the villagers get their stuff back while also not harming this creature who
Right.
is also in the force. Yeah, simple indeed, right, Brian?
Oh yeah.
Simple
So simple.
indeed.
So
Keep walking us through that.
so the shield is missing. She realizes the Salamica, however you say it, I think it's Salamica, has taken the shield, and she sees these hunters that are getting ready to go hunt this thing down,
Mhm.
getting blasters and whatnot. And she's like, I'm gonna go with you guys. So we cut forward to entering the cave, you know, where they say this thing is
Right.
living, and she tells everybody, wait outside, let me go in and kind of see what's going on. And she goes into the cave and she finds this thing asleep on this pile of junk. And as she's looking around, she finds the droid that she's looking for, this guy's droid, sticking out of the junk. And so she's trying to use the force to wiggle it free and whatnot. And she gets the droid out. Um, but in the process, kind of stirs the creature a little bit
Right.
and starts trying to give it some calming thoughts and trying to get it to go back to sleep. Uh, and all of a sudden, the creature wakes up because it senses the same thing she does. There's danger, and all of the hunters have come into the cave and just started trying to blast this thing.
When in doubt, start blasting,
That's
right?
right. Shoot first, ask questions later. Yeah.
She goes,
Um,
yeah, it's like typical, all right, wait for me. It's all gonna be good. And everyone's like, okay. Oh, it's been 3 seconds. Something must have
right.
gone
Yeah.
wrong. Let's go in, guns blazing.
Right. And so, you know, as this is happening, she spots Solandra's shield. It's in the junk pile, and she sees these blaster bolts heading for the Salamica, and she uses the force to
Mhm.
basically shield the blaster bolts from the Salamica and trying to protect it as well. Because while she was in the cave, she noticed that there are these carcasses of these spiders that are hanging from the ceiling
Mhm.
that are incredibly poisonous spiders. And she realizes this thing has been eating these spiders and probably protecting the villagers from
Mhm.
these spiders. And so she takes it upon herself. She starts to realize the lesson Solandra is trying to teach her about being a shield, not just to the villagers,
Mhm.
but to the creature as well, protecting them from each other.
Right.
And so she protects the Salamica, and scares the hunters off, tells them to go back to the village, and is able to calm the beast back down enough to get it to go back to
Right.
sleep. So that, to me, all I can picture is, you
Mhm.
know, Smaug. That's all I can think of.
Right. but
from
it's
Hobbit.
but like a nice like a nice smoke because
Like a
the
nice
creature
smoke.
doesn't come and
Yeah.
destroy like the village, and then
Right.
she comes up with a great plan to make sure that the Samaka is going to be okay.
Yep.
It will be fine, and that the Samaka will also keep those spiders away, and like they can kind of realize that we have a mutually beneficial partnership.
Yes.
And something like we talk all the time about like all these big things that happen in Star Wars, but something that was kind of poignant about the story, and I wrote this down. I said like we all take little time really to think about like everything around us, and like the lesson that Salandra was trying to teach was like the unintended consequences that our actions can have. Like, sure, if you retrieve my shield and you get rid of this beast, yes, you've gotten everyone their scrap metal back, but the village itself could be completely wiped out by these giant like eat poisonous spiders that could infect everyone there. So being able to see like the different webs and everything being interconnected in the Force, and shielding each part of, like you said, those living things in the Force, that's really a Jedi's role, is being able to see past the immediate and see like the bigger picture. And I thought it was like a beautiful lesson for Rupert to not necessarily learn. I don't think she learned that lesson here. I think it was just, it finally clicked. Like it was something that she has been learning, but it was in this like trial where it finally hit home in the sense that she's like, yes, I fully understand now, and then can like integrate that into her own life a little bit more like efficiently, a little bit more consistently. And it was a nice story, and it made me excited when I ultimately got the middle grade novels to then read about Salandra and then read about Rupert and everything. I thought it was really good. It was really solid. Do you have any
to build on your point about her already, just kind of everything clicking? Salandra makes the comment to her too. She's like, I've known for a while now that you were ready for the trials, but you needed to prove it to yourself, and so I think that goes along perfectly with what you said. And when she comes back, and Salandra, she almost seems relieved when she comes back, because she was worried about Rupert. She wasn't, entirely sure how that was going to go.
Salmic is not like it's not like a a lovely pet. It's right. It can take you out.
Pretty formidable, and so Rupert goes to give Salandra the shield to complete her trials,
right?
And Salandra just tells her, keep it. It was my masters. They got passed down to me. Now I'm passing it down to you.
Right.
And someday you'll pass it on to your Padawan, and so on and so forth. And so I thought that was a nice little ending point for Rupert and Salandra.
I would love, and this may never happen, but I would love a prequel era story where they don't have like the specific, story centered around the legend of the shield. But it would be cool if there was like a nod at some point, like a prequel era story,
a Jedi carrying it somewhere,
or in the Acolyte, like maybe there's a Jedi with a literal shield. Like that would
be cool. Like just walking in the background down the hallway of the temple with a shield on their back.
It doesn't have to be something like this is a main character, but just seeing a Jedi with a shield, because exactly who that would be, like the lineage.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like obviously the Jedi aren't like having kids and procreating with one another,
right?
Like the lineage is in the master to apprentice like pipeline, right. And so it would be cool to see like the lineage of Rupert and on down, and know that that's heritage continued, and it honestly makes you even more sad. Everything about the High Republic, and some people, I think, when this initiative first started, were like, why are we doing this like height of the Jedi, golden age? But everything about the High Republic amplifies the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, really all the saga films to it. But Palpatine's rise and the fall of the Jedi specifically, it is amplified and made so much heavier by the High Republic, because you're seeing what the Jedi
grace that they fell from.
And seeing that the high, and even the little things about like a heritage of a master passing this shield down, and thinking about the generations that was being passed down, and all of that being lost probably with the fall of the Jedi, and knowing that was no more. You wonder what other traditions existed between masters to apprentices that was passed down for hundreds and thousands of years, that was completely wiped out because of the rise of Palpatine and what the Jedi ended up falling into as well.
Mhm.
And it makes the gravity of the prequel
Yeah.
movies, it enhances all of it. And the Acolyte comes out in June, and I hope that show can translate a little bit of that. And I know it's at the end of the High Republic, but I hope that we still get a glimpse of
Yeah.
the Jedi doing things that are not what we have seen them do before, so we
Right.
understand like the gravity of that. Anyway, that's a little bit more than just Shield of the Jedi, but I think that
Yeah.
these little lessons or these little tidbits that we get in these stories kind of amplify a larger like message in Star Wars.
Absolutely.
So that's Shield of the Jedi. Shall we
story.
continue on to
I'm
the
game.
second one? So
truck right
we're
along.
still going to be camping out here in the year 379 BBY and Tales of Light and Life. But we're also going to be taking on another George Mann story. This one is A Closed Fist Has No Claws. Now, George Mann I said this, does this man just cook? Like this, is that all he's doing all day is just, he's in the kitchen cooking, like gearing up some great Star Wars, because this guy is just, he's on it like all the time.
Hang on a second, because I think I might have got that wrong.
Okay. Because I didn't think anyone wrote 2.
Yeah. I think I wrote it. I think I have that graphic wrong. And if I do that,
you did that on purpose.
It is,
made me just
it
sound
is
like
Tessa
a moron
Grattan.
there.
It is Tessa Grattan,
Oh,
guys. I am so sorry.
Even better, because Tessa Grattan,
know.
she wrote Temptation of the Force, which I'm 62% of the way through now, and it is amazing.
Oh
my goodness, like Brian, like this book.
I can't wait. I'm so jealous of you. I hate you.
Like, I can't. It's, oh my goodness. And so Tessa Grattan, thank you so much.
Tessa Grattan,
you wrote this, not you, George. Get off the screen.
Sorry. That's my bad, guys.
The High Republic. For those of you listening on Apple and Spotify, just know we did not make any errors in the thumbnails. Like there's no error at all. Like what you're listening to is just a little inside joke.
Move along.
The High Republic Phase 2. This is our last Phase 2 story, I believe, that we have.
I think it is. Yeah.
And this was the year 379 BBY. So we're, a few years, down the line from 382 still. And of course, this obviously came out October 26, 2022, because all the book dropped at once. Now, this story is a completely different tone than Shield of the Jedi. It could not be, any more different in tone. This one follows a very purpose-driven, angry, and jaded Marta Rowe, who has lost all of the naivety, hopeful, free-spirited young self that we saw in Path of Deceit, that was, falling in love with Kevmo Zink. She has completely changed. And this story is about her search for other Everini, who we find is probably Marta Rowe's husband, who becomes, or at least, becomes the father of the great grandfather of Markian Rowe, because we now know Marta is the great grandmother of, Markian Rowe. So presumably we kind of get the family tree lining up here. Right. And there are some dark things that happen in the story. So what was your first impression of Marta in this? Because any trace of the Marta that we kind of love in Path of Deceit and in part of Path of Vengeance is completely gone. Dare I say, is there as stark a contrast between characters in all of Star Wars outside of maybe, like 9-year-old Anakin becoming, the sweet kid we meet in Phantom Menace becoming Darth Vader? Like outside of that, is there a huge
jump
fall? Like it's massive.
It's a huge jump. And what I like about this story is actually told kind of first person from Marta's point of view. It's almost like she's recording this message to pass on to, her future generations, and kind of a message, I guess you could say, for Markion, right? And so that's kind of the way I took it. I took it as Markion is listening to this story, right?
Yes, it pretty much transitions to like, it's like a letter that is written for her,
whoever ends up taking over the Gates Electric and moving forward, right?
Whoever her, the line continues.
I really thought this was a cool story. And it seemed I say this a lot with some of these stories. It seemed like the natural progression of Marta Rowe, wanting to know more about her species, wanting to find more of her species, using what the mother left behind to kind of make sure that that happens for her.
Like the remnants of the path. Like she's
Right.
commanding the
Making
remnants.
sure that the path doesn't exist out there anymore. Because what she's doing is going around and finding old path members and trying to convince them to follow her. And what she's doing, basically what the mother did, right? But if they don't want to anymore, they go off and she tells them, I don't want to find out you're starting a path out there somewhere. I'll come for you if you do.
Yeah.
And
She's out for blood.
Yes, she is.
Because the leveler is still on board.
Yes. She still has the leveler. Yeah.
And she's feeding it Jedi that come across their path.
She stumbles
along
across.
The way.
Yeah.
There's one takes him out.
There's one that I don't even think it said his name in the story, but she walks up to him on a planet and she's like, "Are you a Jedi?" And he's like, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" And she's like, "Do you not have a Padawan?" And he was like, "No." And she's like, "Come with me." And she like tears the crap out of him, like just slashes him with her claws and just beats him to a pulp and drags him before the leveler and feeds him to it. And it was an awesome, I love that scene. Because her crew is watching too. Her crew is like, oh, and looking away, they can't handle it. And honestly, it got pretty detailed too about the transitioning into the dust and everything in this story. So from her point of view, what she was witnessing it, as
it's it's brutal. And then the story is about really the forging and the initial sharpening of the knife that becomes the Nile, the knife that becomes the Roe lineage, and obviously is perfected and to a T, to the tip of the knife by Markian Roe. And it's almost like you're creating this knife, the sword, you're forging it, and Markian Roe's the one that ultimately wields it and uses it to cause catastrophic damage later on in the timeline. Because obviously I'm mentioning Markian, we haven't gotten there yet, but Markian is formidable and offspring of Marta Rowe. And what did you think? She's searching for other Evereni because she believes that they're stronger together. Right. And I did find it interesting that she did get wind of a few Evereni. One of them was one without one hand, and it was a way of mentioning Lana, who she is, Marta's the one who's making sure she only has one hand because she, severed it off. And so she's like, well, forget about her. Like, she might get hers someday. So I'm curious to see. I want another. It would be so great to have another Marta story because we have the beginning, we have the beginning of the end here as well. Right. And then there's all of this, I don't know what they call it, chaos, madness, rage that is going to last for some time because the Gaze Electric's history is hundreds of years. So there's definitely a lineage here. Right. So it would be fascinating to see how that ultimately manifests throughout the rest of her life. What did you think of her encounters with the other, Evereni?
I thought it was funny how she was trying to bring them all together, but every one of them she met was like, no, we don't meet each other. We only meet each other in death. We're not supposed to be grouping together, like that. And I thought it was funny how she wanted to learn from all of them too. She was constantly asking questions about her species. She was finally getting answers that she had never knew before. She found out what her last name meant, and she found out some of the language, the first guy she comes across, he doesn't tell her his name, but basically call me old uncle. I'm not even, they're not even related, but they call all their elders, old aunt or uncle. And she starts to learn this about her people and how, none of them meet unless it's in death. And so I thought it was kind of cool how she was still going against that, even though she heard that from, from him. She was still trying to go against that grain and try to find somebody that she could, kind of relate to. And, and she was asking questions. Do you see the ghosts? Do you see dead ghosts? And he's like, no, I don't see any of that. And so, just being able to learn more about herself, things that she'd wanted to know all throughout this entire story that you just never knew, that she never knew.
I guess it's just a Roe thing, seeing the ghosts.
Yeah. So
the interesting thing, we didn't touch on this. When she kills the Jedi, the blood on her hands, she ultimately puts it on the wall and makes the swirling logo that later becomes the logo, Nile, like the symbol for the Nile. And to know that the symbol for the Nile was born out of the blood of a Jedi, that is Marta Rose, the blood on Marta Rose, literal blood on her hands.
Yeah.
And what that represents for the space Vikings in the future, that and with the havoc that they're going to cause, that we're going to talk about, is quite compelling, to say the least. Quite compelling. And it's just, what's amazing about Star Wars is its ability to both, like, not necessarily reinvent itself, but to be able to have all of these different stories that feel so incredibly Star Wars-y,
Yeah.
but be completely different, like in tone. Like they're completely different. Like we have Shield of the Jedi, which is this kind of laid back, very wholesome tale about looking for the little things in life as well. And then we have this one here, which is about this just bloody rage, murder, and vengeance, and this revenge tour that she's on as well. And so but they're both incredibly Star Wars at the same time.
Well, and she basically starts the first iteration of the Nile, becoming raiders, and she's she recruits some people that want to work for her, and they have some ships on board the Gaze, and they're going out and raiding and bringing stuff back, keeping what they can use. And so it really does get to a point where it's the first workings of the Nile, not with that name necessarily. But it's really the first workings of it. And some of the people that work for her, there's one female human, I can't think of her name off the top of my head right now. Alara, I think it's Alara, maybe.
Right.
Anyway, it's an A name. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. But she really does want to follow Marta on this story and on this journey, but she doesn't even know what they are, and she's kind of the one that's really body checking her a little bit and like, what are we doing, and so it's kind of cool, I mean, she's got basically the workings of the Nile. You've got your 3 ships going out, bringing stuff back, and it's like the Tempest Runners, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of cool to just see the kind of the birth of that before it even was.
It's the birth of a thorn in the Republic's side, to say the least. Yeah. And again, there are countless stories to be told, and so we're winding down phase 2. So I want to ask, what characters, because this is Marta specific, like beyond, like including Marta, what characters would you like to see their stories expanded upon, like the most from phase 2? Like if there was going to be, another book initiative around characters from phase 2,
right?
Who are you most like, I would really want to see what happens next here?
Honestly, Marta's on that list. Marta and Yana are definitely on that list. But as much as I love the Jedi in this era,
I know what you're going to say.
I don't know if you do or not. Look, I do want to see more Gela. I would love to see more Gela. But I want to see more of the mother. I want to see where she came from and what, I mean, we know where she came from, obviously, but like, I want to see her grow up with that resentment and knowing that her sister got taken to be a Jedi, and kind of her forming those thoughts and everything like that, and kind of enacting her plan, very Palpatine-like, to take over the path and everything. I would love to see that story.
I didn't know what you were gonna say. I thought you were gonna go Fontu and Ziri. I thought that's what you were gonna say.
I would love to see more of them too.
That's my number 1 from phase 2. Like Fontu and Ziri are my favorites. I would lay down my life for either one of them. Yeah. And I challenge any author to write a story that breaks the two of them apart, or ends in destruction for them, because you can't do it. You just can't do it. Like it should not happen. Let me just have their happiness intact. Like those two would probably be my top of my list. Like, but I also think like those two, ultimately you're gonna get Gela and Axel. Like just that quartet. Like I just want give me, like, I would read 10 books of that quartet, they are fantastic. I love everything about those 4 and those 2 like duos. I would love like a story where it's like the pairs like are on separate trajectories, and it's told from like each pair's point of view, and they ultimately like are on a converging path
We
down
gotta
the
stop
line.
meeting like this, guys.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like ultimately like they end up having to meet up or something, because I kind of like how Dalna worked with the Night of Sorrow and all these different
Yeah.
pathways crossed together ultimately. But
Yeah.
those would probably be like the top of my list. I like Creighton's son. I like some of these other like Salandra and Rupert, but I'm
I
kind of
love
with you.
Salandra,
Like
yeah.
I really want Marta and Yana. Like there is so much more to really dive into, especially with we know the future of Marta's family,
Yeah.
to be able to dive into like what happens, how do they create their purpose, how do they decide to freeze the leveler and put it in
Right.
captivity versus continuing to use it. Like how were these decisions made to do these things? We don't know.
Right.
Honestly, this story kind of left us with more questions than answers. Like we got little hints at what is to come, but we don't know anything about
Right.
the formation, the creation, and the steps that were taken along the way. It's still shrouded in a lot of mystery, and
Yeah.
I feel like we'll probably get a few answers. Obviously, like phase 3 still has. I haven't finished Temptation of the Force. There's Tears of the Nameless. There's obviously the last book that comes out next year. We have other books and audio dramas and comics, but they're not going to completely tell a story that began in phase 2. So
Right.
that's kind of what I would love to see. But the great thing about the High Republic is it's so far removed from everything. It's just this blank
You have
canvas.
the range and the freedom.
They can do so
whatever
much.
it is you want to do.
Even
Yeah.
after phase 3, whoever's left standing, they can still carry on those stories. They have 150 years to work with from phase 2 to phase 1, so there's plenty of room to tell more of these stories. I hope that they do. We know we're getting more Porter Ingalls stories in between phase 2 and phase 1, so that's going to be fun. But that wraps up phase 2.
Well, not necessarily, not yet. We haven't got to the end of the story yet. We haven't got.
Oh my gosh!
You're
I jumped
like,
the gun. I'm ready to get out of. I'm just ready to get out of phase 2.
I know you are. I know you. We'll wrap it up here pretty quick. Basically, Marta gets word of a couple of Evereni. How do you say it?
I say Evereni.
She gets word of a couple of them, and she invites them onto the gaze. And she keeps them as guests for a little while. I can't believe you tried to skip over this. This is so cool.
So I apologize. I was like, in my mind, I thought we talked about that, and then I was like, all right, let's talk about the stories we want to hear, like later on. And okay, sorry.
But she,
please don't.
She would slash your throat for leaving out this part.
Suddenly, the Nile symbol is on my wall in my own blood. Great, wonderful,
great. You got a nameless bearing down on you.
All right, kids, you got to find a sub for the last 3 weeks of school.
So she brings these two on board, and she can tell that they're siblings, brother and sister. And she's sparring with the sister, and it gets pretty brutal. Gets her arm slashed open. And so they start to learn a little bit more about each other. And one night they are eating dinner, and they're having a little bit of a get together with with Marta's crew and everything, and the brother and sister are there. And the sister comes over and is telling Marta, my brother thinks you are beautiful. He thinks you're gorgeous. And as she's talking to her about this stuff, there's footsteps behind her, and Marta's aide, the human I talked about earlier, comes up and stabs the sister in the back with a dagger. And the sister turns around, grabs her by the throat, and crushes her throat, rips her throat out basically, and drops her. And Marta kills the sister right in front of her brother, saying, she was mine. You took her from me. She was mine. And she says to this brother, he's like, we've always only ever had each other. I don't know how to live without her. She's been there for all my life so far. And Marta says, be there for the rest. Let me be there for the rest of your life. And basically finds him as a mate. You know what I mean? And so,
Vito Fair, I think is how you like, or
I think
Fair
you're right.
or something like that.
And
his name.
Velka?
Who? Yes.
Velka was the other one. And
who we assume becomes, the great grandfather of, Markian.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where that story ends. That's where it ends. She finds
I killed your sister. Your sister killed like my best friend.
Marry me. Yeah.
So like we're supposed to be together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
there are worse mating
I like
stories.
that ending though, because it lends towards the brutality of Marta. And like you say, because she starts off as this like naive, fun-loving,
wholesome
child caretaker, you know, in the path, and
Joyful,
then she ends up
free-spirited.
Yeah, and she ends up just this brutal,
Vicious.
cold, calculating, you know, just warmonger, basically. You know what I mean? And so it, like you said earlier, it was a great transition. She was a great character arc from beginning to end in phase 2.
Crazy arc.
So.
It's crazy. It's just it's mind blowing that we started out in Path of the Sea, and then this is the character that we're left with. It's really sad. It's really sad, but
it is
also gruesome story as well. Tessa Gratton is wild, man. She's wild. She's telling this gruesome story, and then she's over here talking about like Elzar Avar's sexual tension and love and temptation of the Force. And I'm like, she plays both sides of the coin right here. So she knows what she's doing.
So let me ask you this: which book was? Oh, I can't even remember off the top of my head which book it was. There was a Star Wars book that came out not too long ago. I cannot remember the name of it though, but it was an incredibly horny book, and I cannot remember the name. I can't remember which one it was. I can't even see my books on the shelf. I can't remember what book it was, but it was really up there. And so I like, is this like, so I don't know. Now you got me questioning Temptation of the Force. I'm not sure if I'm like ready to read this one or not.
Like, I'm wondering what just happened. It's not like that.
No,
it's not like that.
Okay. Because I cannot remember which freaking book it was either. I remember reading it. It was just like, oh my God. I ended up having to like, I put it down. I was like, I'm glad that's over.
Are you reading like, is this a real Star Wars? Is this some fan fiction you stumbled upon? I don't remember
which freaking book it was. Hang on a second. Now I gotta figure it out. No, it wasn't. No, I don't read that kind of, I don't read that kind of fan fiction. But I don't remember which book
Star
it was.
Wars fan fiction erotica.
No, I don't remember which freaking book it was.
Well, Brian's looking for the Star Wars the horny files.
Oh, Jedi Battle Scars. It was Jedi Battle Scars.
Oh, I haven't read Jedi Battle Scars.
Okay, yeah, no, that was the novel in between the Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor.
Is it with it was Cal and the Night Sister and Marin?
Yeah, it's
juicy.
I put it was a little spicy. That was a spicy book, and we'll talk about it when we get there. We'll talk about it when we get there. But I was like, I finished that book. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I was so glad it was finally over. I was like, holy crap, dude. So yeah, no, sorry. I thought I'd throw that in there. God,
you can catch the Timeline show on Monday nights every single Monday night at some point.
That's my exit cue.
Let's transition down to the end of the show, and you can catch the Timeline show Monday nights. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast as well. Apple, Spotify. You can follow us there. Leave a 5-star review. We're going to go through the whole Star Wars canon timeline. In the year 2096, our time was when Brian and I plan to finish the timeline show.
We'll get there.
So we'll be fine. We'll get like a joint retirement home suite next to each other, and we'll have like the live stream, but by then we'll probably have forgotten all these stories, and we'll be like, we're like, all right, the year is 96 BBY, and we're talking about Fan 2 and Ziri still. What? No, that's what's gonna happen. You can also
talked about that one.
You can also watch Star Wars Newsnet live every Thursday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time, where we break down the latest in the Star Wars galaxy. And then stay tuned to the channel for other short, small videos and special discussions that we have planned for the future. But that has been this episode of the Timeline Show. Until next time, for light and life, everyone.
May the Force be with you.